Adidas just released a $500 super shoe. And just 10 days later, that shoe helped smash the women's world marathon record in Berlin. So what can this shoe do for a non-elite? Is it worth $500? Are those even the right questions to ask about a shoe like this? It's time to lace up the Evo 1 and take it for a run. Yo, what's going on everybody? My name is Kofuzi and today I want to talk to you guys about the Adidas Adizero Adios Pro Evo 1. But before I give you my thoughts on this shoe, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that Adidas sent to me for the purpose of review, so I did not have to pay for them. However, no one's paying me to make this video or to use the shoe, and no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about this brand new super shoe. First, let's go over some specs on the shoe. Number one, it's a $500 shoe, and that is the spec that most people are talking about. But inside, there's a lot of technology going on here. There's a 39mm stack height in the heel with a 6mm drop, giving us 33mm of stack height in the forefoot. And while it says there's Light Strike Pro in this midsole, it's different than any other Light Strike Pro we've seen before. This shoe has Light Strike Pro that's non-compression molded, which results in a product that is lighter, airier, squishier, and more responsive. The downside of this though is that it doesn't have good longevity. It's not a durable foam. Adidas tells us that you can use it for one, familiarization run, so you can kind of get acquainted with the dynamics of the shoe and make sure it's gonna work for you on your most important race attempts. And then you could use it for that marathon race. And then pretty much after that, it's spent. I don't think that the shoe is gonna disintegrate after that one marathon, but it's not gonna have the same qualities, the same caliber of pop and responsiveness than it's going to have when it's fresh out of the box. The lightness of the shoe is also a really big headline. Adidas is telling us that it's 138 grams, which is absolutely featherweight. However, they're using a size 9.5, which is a little bit different than industry standard, although not unheard of. For my size 9, which is typically the reference size, my shoe weighed in at 134 grams or 4.7 ounces. And the way that they've cut the weight on this shoe, in addition to developing this brand new type of Light Strike Pro, is that they've removed the sock liner. There's no sock liner in this shoe at all. And the upper is translucent, which Adidas tells us is just a metaphor for the overall lightness of the shoe, but that material is extremely lightweight as well. Also, it's very strong. And because it's kind of see-through, you can even see some of the stitching where the upper is connected to that midsole. There is a little bit of padding around the sides of the ankle and in the back towards the Achilles, and it's covered in something that kind of feels like felt, so it's a little bit on that softer side as well. There are reinforcements by all the lace loops, and the tongue is somewhat gusseted on the medial side, but otherwise it hangs pretty loose. It's actually very difficult to get your foot into the shoe. There's a lot of kind of wiggling that you have to do to get in there, but once you are, it fits really flush and comfortably on top with just a tiny bit of padding down the center here to prevent any pressure when you really crank down on those laces. Also on the outsole is where we're saving weight with something that Adidas is calling liquid rubber. It's not a continental outsole, although we have seen out in the wild that there are some versions of this shoe with continental rubber on the outsole, but this one comes in with basically tire slicks, a very thin layer of rubber on the forefoot and some color matched strips that go along both sides of the heel. And these are the ways that this shoe is achieving that incredible lightness. Now there is a stabilizing element in this shoe, and I'm not sure what that stabilizing element is made out of. I'm not sure if it's carbon or not, or some sort of carbon composite, but it looks more like a fish spatula or perhaps the logo of a very fancy podiatrist. It kind of like follows the outline of your foot, but it's kind of like wavy in a way that's reminiscent of the energy rods that we see in the Adios Pro lineup, but it's a little bit different than anything else we've seen over there before. Another thing that they've done to really make this shoe very different than a lot of the other shoes on the market and anything that Adidas has ever done before is that they changed the rocker position. So the rocker position is when the shoe starts to kind of curl up. It's not like a flat shoe. The whole shoe doesn't lay flat on the table. Instead, it rolls a little bit. Now, a lot of shoes, if you take, for example, the Adios Pro version 3, starts at what Adidas tells us is 70% of the shoe. So you get through 70% of the shoe, and then it starts to curl forward. This shoe starts at 60%, so basically at the midway point, kind of like where the pads of your foot are, that's where it starts to curl up. So it curls earlier, but it also means that that curl is a little bit more gradual throughout the entire length of the shoe, and they say that's going to help with racing at marathon effort. So now that we've covered all those specs, let's get to what you guys came here for. What was it like to actually run in the shoe? And let me first start out by saying it's not what I was expecting. I was expecting like a super tall, a super dynamic experience where I was like squishing the foam and it was shooting me back up into the air. I was basically expecting something that was going to defy the laws of physics and make me feel like I was being catapulted with every step. That's not exactly what I got here, but it's not to say that this wasn't a fantastic shoe to run in. The Lightstrike Pro that's in the Evo 1 is lighter, it's airier. It definitely has a lot more sponginess to it where I feel like I am moving that foam quite a bit more, but it also didn't feel like I was running in an Adios Pro 3 either. It didn't feel like a super Adios Pro. In fact, because I think of that 60% rocker that starts that much further back, it actually didn't feel like there was a rocker on this shoe at all. It just felt like a piece of foam that was very exquisitely tailored to the bottom side of my foot. So I didn't really feel a lot of geometry interfering with my foot strike. And in fact, the shoe in the Adidas lineup that the Evo 1 reminds me the most of is actually my favorite Adidas racing shoe, and that's the Takumi Sen. I love this shoe because it's really lightweight, has a thin layer of Lightstrike Pro in there. And for me, this feels like a racing flat with a little bit of extra cushion to it and a lightness that I find really pleasant. The only drawback for me in this shoe is that it's a 5K, 10K racer, and I don't feel like I could take it for the full marathon distance. But what we have in the Evo 1, to me, is a super Takumi, something that has a lot of that same excitement and even lighter on-foot feel, but it has enough cushion that I definitely think that I could take this for the full marathon. So let's break it down a little bit further now and talk about some of the paces that I was running with this shoe and kind of how I felt at each of those paces, which I think is gonna help for me as a non-elite explain this shoe to you guys. So I took it out for 3 different sets of paces in this run, trying to get as much out of the single testing run that I could, keeping in mind that the shoe has a very short lifespan. I didn't want to kind of use it all up in just the first testing run. So the first thing I did was I took it at 4 miles at marathon effort. And the main thing that I'll add to what I've already described the shoe as is that at marathon effort, it's not a twitchy shoe, which is what I really thought it would be. Like any little kind of slight change in effort would result in an outsized difference in kind of like how fast or slowed down the shoe would feel. Instead, it just always felt like the shoe was meeting me at my fitness level. So if I just kind of like set it and forget it and thought about running at marathon effort, it was getting me there at that current level of fitness where I am, which is a handful of minutes under my current BQ pace. And so I just felt like it was a great shoe that didn't make me have to work and I could just kind of zone out, which is when you're trying to run a fast marathon, something you really want to do for as long as possible while maintaining that goal effort. So I felt like the magic of the shoe at marathon effort was that it was really light and it didn't make you think about the shoe and it didn't make you think about how hard you were working. But when I cranked it up a little bit more and started doing some mile repeats at threshold effort, that's where I felt like the shoe was probably the most exciting. I felt like at that point I'm putting a little bit more into the ground and I felt like somehow the shoe was giving me a little bit more back. So I felt like I was getting a lot more power for what I was putting in at that level. I felt like the foam was really the most special for me at that threshold pace in between kind of half marathon and 10K effort. But yet at the same time, it didn't feel like the shoe was doing all the work. It felt like I was somehow suddenly much stronger in my quads and hamstrings than I normally feel in any other racing shoe. So it's again, a very confidence inspiring shoe because at at those efforts, the predominant thing that I want to feel is power. And so at marathon effort, I want to feel easy. Threshold effort, I want to feel powerful. And it's delivering both of those things at those respective effort levels. And then I also did a couple of repeats, 400 meter repeats at 5K pace. And the shoe is really excellent there as well. The predominant thing that I'm feeling is the lightness of the shoe. Turnover is super quick, and I feel like I can really claw back and do those butt kicks and really get through that full range of motion quickly in order to meet the paces that I want to when I'm trying to run some 5K effort or VO2 max level repeat. So pretty much at all three kind of race paces that I typically train at when I'm training for half marathons or marathons, the Evo 1 is a very exciting shoe to run in, but particularly emphasizing that threshold level between half marathon and 10K pace. That's where I feel like the shoe is the most exciting for me. In terms of sizing, it definitely felt true to size. It was one of the most comfortable racing uppers I've ever experienced. This super thin, lightweight, translucent material is just really accommodating. And as far as traction goes, I didn't test it on a wet day. I felt like I had plenty of grip and I really wasn't worried about grip on the shoe at all. It kind of reminded me a lot of the original Adios Pro 1, which also had a very slick thin layer of rubber on the outsole. It didn't have like lugs or cutouts from any of the outsole rubber, and people were really worried about that, but I ran in that shoe on snowpack and it was absolutely fine there. So I don't personally at this point have any concerns about the rubber on the outsole. Now this is the portion of a review video where I typically start going into some comparison shoes, some other shoes on the market that you can look at if you're interested in this shoe, and other shoes that you might use if you're trying to build a rotation around this shoe. But this shoe is really rare. They only made 521 of them. They're all numbered. Mine is number 58. So they're not exactly available for most people watching this video to go out and buy. And they're also $500 for a one race shoe. So it's not really something that I'm gonna be recommending to the general public to even try, even if you have the money. So the more important question for me is, why did they make this shoe? Why did they release this shoe? And really, who is it for? And I think that the answer to all of those questions is the fact that this really isn't a shoe intended for mass consumption. It's not a shoe for everybody. This is essentially a concept car, but it's one that we're actually, as members of like the media and kind of the general public, able to kind of test out and experience, unlike concept cars that you see at an auto show that kind of spin around on those giant turntables, but no one ever actually gets to drive. At the end of the day, I feel like this is a shoe enthusiast shoes, a collector's item. It's not really something that's intended for actual racing by normal people. And I appreciate though what Adidas has done here. Some people are mad about it, upset. How can you release such a thing? How come you can only make it $500? These are all legitimate gripes. But what Adidas very easily could have done is they could have developed a fantastic shoe, given it to their elites and had them racing it as a prototype for only the elites to know and experience, and then take those shoes and bury them deep into the Adidas archives, never to be seen again. But instead what they've done is they've taken that shoe, acknowledged its shortcomings as is, but yet given us a chance to see a glimpse of what hopefully is in the future of super shoe racing. It's one of the most exciting shoes that I've ever come across and one of the most super of the super shoes, but its kryptonite is certainly its longevity. At one marathon of racing, it's not a real shoe yet. So those are my thoughts on the Adidas Adizero Adios Pro Evo 1. Let me know in the comments if you have any other questions, or better yet, stop by the live stream I do Monday through Friday over on the Kofuzi Run Club channel. I'd love to talk to you guys in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?